What's up, fight fans? This is Kurt DeVille with Counterpunch Boxing News, and I have some new news concerning Terence Crawford, Keith Thurman, Danny Garcia. Get this. Terence Crawford says, my, how the tables have turned at Danny Garcia. You, at Keith Thurman Jr., will never, and I mean never, get a shot at the top dog, and that's me. Y'all hoe asses didn't want no smoke when I wanted to fight. Remember? Now, y'all want to fight so bad. Laughing emoji, laughing emoji, laughing emoji. Go keep fighting each other like before. He also said all these fighters that was claiming to be their own bosses was hiding behind the term call Al. Now they talking like they can fight whoever they want. Boy, y'all some pawns. Go sit down. And let me counterpunch. Shit, you can't argue with that, because that's exactly what happened. I mean, when you had Terence Crawford coming into the division, you had Manny Pacquiao, so that was like their guy that everybody really wanted a shot at. Like Errol Spence wanted a shot at him. Keith Thurman got the shot at him, come up short. You had Adrian Broner got the shot at him. So, you had Danny Garcia, which I think Danny was kind of like a cherry picker on high. You know what I mean? Like him and Deontay Wilder, they came from Golden Boy, and they were labeled cherry pickers about 5 or 6 years ago. A lot of people forget that. Deontay Wilder, he was labeled a cherry picker because he hadn't fought anybody. And Danny Garcia was fighting guys like Samuel Vargas. You know what I'm saying? And then guys like Keith Thurman, that was once ducked by Floyd Money Mayweather, was mad and hungry and vicious for everybody in the division. Okay? Until guys like Errol Spence come along. Okay? And remember, like Danny Garcia, Sean Porter, Keith Thurman, those guys had been there, okay? Dennis Ugas even. Those guys were already there in the division, okay? Danny got there a little later, but, I mean, he was at 140, which Terence Crawford was at 140. Terence Crawford gets there in 15 or 14. He leaves and goes to 147. Okay, so, and then when Terence goes from 140 to 147, and then all of a sudden, you had Angel Garcia making remarks and talking about his skin color and how he looked that had nothing to do with the fight ability of the fight at hand. So, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to fight you. I'm going to duck you. And on top of that, I'm going to insult you. That's what they did. Okay. Now, as far as Keith Thurman stayed injured, and Keith Thurman pretty much, after the Manny Pacquiao fight, we didn't really see enough of him, but he did have his 2 cents to say about Terence Crawford. And I quote, Keith Thurman said that he doesn't even look at Terence Crawford and respect him as a welterweight. He's not a true welterweight. That was his wording. He's not a true welterweight. He's not a real welterweight. And it wasn't just Danny. It wasn't just Keith Thurman, okay? It was more involved. It was the whole network of Fox, PBC, Showtime. They had it orchestrated that they excluded Terence Crawford out of the whole equation of the welterweight division. The WBO, World Boxing Organization, is a sanctioning body that is respected, okay? And it's one of the main belts now, okay? And they took that shit like it didn't exist. It was like this invisible bear in the room. Okay. And I remember it was a fight where they had, at that time, you had Sean Porter with the WBC, you had Errol Spence with the IBF, and the WBA belonged to, I want to say Keith Thurman or Manny Pacquiao. Okay. And then they had another belt. They had Pacquiao at like another WBA. So they had another WBA champion, which was the regular WBA. Because remember when they had that regular title, then the super title. So the WBA did that type of shit like they did with Danny Jacobs and Golovkin, that. So they did that little regular versus, kind of like Daniel Dubois and then Alexander Usyk. Okay, better example. So they had Manny there, and then they had Keith Thurman, then they had Errol Spence, then they had Shawn Porter. They did not even include Terence Crawford, and it was sad. And then it just showed you how much they were trying to avoid this man's presence in the welterweight division. So I can understand why Terence Crawford is feeling the way he's feeling at the point in time, okay? You know, because he's got all those belts now. Now they all want to fight him. Now they all pretend that they can and they can't. And he said, your pawns go sit down, because that's exactly what they are. See, Al Heyman knows who was the star. He knows who was projected to be the star. You know, Errol Spence, Gervonta Tank Davis, those guys are the stars, you know, or were. Because Errol Spence, you know, he needs his rematch, so he'll get another check. So he'll be set for life, you know, just, you know, he can do what he can do. But, you know, saying what I'm saying about Al Heyman really called the shots. You know, and then the guys, you know, I think it was a situation where Errol Spence, you know, was believed by Al Heyman that he was the boss. Okay. He believed that he was the boss. He believed that he was a promoter himself, and which really he wasn't. You know, as a hell of a thing, you know, you got that type of persuasion to convince a fighter that he's actually the boss when he's actually not. That's what Al Heyman was saying. Okay, so when you have man down promotions, really, what is that? Like, dude, stop. You know, save the money on that LLC and spend it on something else, like your cattle in your house or your property, because that's probably, you know, I think better suited for you, and it means more than that promotional company you claim you have or whatever. But to be fair, he did, you know, some smaller guys up and coming. He was there, and then he was promoting. But, you know, as far as his own fights, though, and a lot of these other fights, these high-scaled fights or high-risk fights, they weren't being pushed to fight those guys. In fact, they were fighting each other. And that's what Terence Crawford is telling them to do. And I think they should do that. The only problem is they're out of mixing matches. See, you can only have so many fights with so many fighters of the same stable, because when they all fight each other, then what else? What else do we really have? Now we have Danny Garcia taking on Erislandy Lara at some point. We don't know. It's been pushed back so many times. But those guys are from two different weight classes. As far as I knew, Erislandy was at 160. Was going to take on Gennady Golovkin. Golovkin, I think, you know, good boy, ducked him. You know what I'm saying? But then now you have Danny Garcia that left 147 to 154, and then he's supposed to be fighting him. So I'm like, okay, that tells me that these guys are running. He's running out of fighters. He's running out of fighters. It's time to go abroad and to challenge your stable with other fighters and other promotional companies. But we'll see if that happens. But you guys tell me what you think of Terence Crawford blasting Keith Thurman and Danny Garcia. Go sit down. You'll never get a shot. Go fight each other. You're a pawn. Of course, please subscribe. And you guys been Counterpunch. Peace!